Hey all, welcome to Flip Side of Normal. Hope you can hear me okay. I have to be sort of quiet. Everybody in my house is sleeping. So I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and do a vlog for you. If you've tuned in before, you know my first two vlogs were basic information about me, kind of a general introduction into who I am, what I'm all about, and what my bipolar disorder means to me. Tonight I thought I'd go a little deeper and sort of give you an insight as to after diagnosis. I have a lot to say pre-diagnosis, but I want to start tonight with deeper diagnosis and save that for another day. Just real quick for those of you who may not have watched my first vlog, back in 2009, I voluntarily admitted myself into the psychiatric unit of my local hospital. I was having some issues, knew something was wrong. That was the safest place for me, so I admitted myself there. And that is where I actually received my diagnosis. I was in there for, I think, somewhere around a week, and it was about 3 or 4 days of a lot of question, a lot of evaluation. Two different doctors, asking me so many questions. I mean, I don't think I've ever been asked so many questions in my life. Um, when I got diagnosed, when the diagnosis was finally given, I was in a room with one of the doctors and my mom and dad, who were very supportive, by the way. But how they got to the diagnosis is that they not only interviewed me, but they interviewed my husband, they interviewed my mom and dad, and asked, all three of them a bunch of questions, sort of about, me from their perspective, so that they could get sort of a whole picture of, the thing. Because when you're talking about mental illness, you don't want to take that lightly, and you definitely don't want to misdiagnose somebody. So you want to make sure you kind of have all your ducks in a row before you give somebody that. Basically what it comes down to is it's a label, and that's what it is. I don't like it, but that's what it is in the end. And I mean, you don't want to label somebody until you are 100% sure. So it took a lot of questioning from a lot of different people, a lot of information before they came up with my diagnosis. But I remember sitting there, it was like a big round table, and we were all sitting around. My mom and dad were over to the right of me. The doctor was here on my left. And, she just came out and told me. And I remember I started crying instantly. This is going to seem kind of funny, but bipolar, it's not a very common thing, or it wasn't. It's more common today, but it used to not be a common thing. And really, I mean, there wasn't much known about it, even just about maybe 10, 15 years ago. It was still fairly new. When I thought of bipolar disorder, I thought of, and this is going to sound corny, and I don't know how many people will remember, but there used to be a show on NBC called ER. It was a hospital show. And there was a nurse on this show. Her name was Abby. I forget who played her, but her name was Abby. And she had a mom who was bipolar, and or who had bipolar disorder. But, because it was a TV drama, they had to sort of over dramatize it. So she was, I mean, probably like the most severe case of bipolar as you can get. Um, I mean, it's, like wigging out, destroying things, destroying the house, being very violent, things of that nature. And so when I heard that diagnosis come out of that doctor's mouth, I mean, honestly, that's the first place my mind went. And I started crying, and the doctor asked me why I was crying. And I told her because I'm crazy. And she said, "Who told you were crazy?" And I was like, "You just did." And she's like, "No, I told you have bipolar disorder. I didn't say you were crazy." And so she went into doctor mode, and she sort of started to describe to me what this diagnosis was, what it meant, things of that nature. But at the time, I mean, my mind was racing. I was going through 100 different emotions, and I really didn't listen to her. I, I, I honestly can't tell you anything that was said to me after the initial diagnosis, when I told her, she told me I was crazy. I don't remember anything she said to me. I can't tell you going back to my room. I mean, I don't remember at all. It's such a blur. But I remember, when I got released and, you know, I mean, it was right there in black and white on my discharge papers, diagnosis bipolar disorder. I didn't want to accept it. And for a long time, I tried to come up with like different excuses as to like why it wasn't bipolar disorder. Like I did this because of this, or it's because of this, things of that nature. I was very unaccepting at first. I just didn't want it. I was also very quiet about it. I think at the time I really got diagnosed. When I first got diagnosed, my mom and dad knew, of course. My husband knew, of course. And I may have told one of my close friends, but I can't remember if I told her right after I got diagnosed or if it was sometime after. But I was very closed-lipped about it. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I was scared. I was confused. I mean, just a whole sort of, whole plethora of emotions for a very long time. And like I said, I didn't want to accept it, so I just didn't even think about it, didn't talk about it, anything. I even started to sort of, after a while, withdraw from life. Before my diagnosis, I have always been a very social person. Always like to go out with everybody, hang out, try new things, go to clubs, go to this, go to that. I mean, I wasn't a drinker, but I like to go out and have a good time with friends and close relatives, whatnot. And after my diagnosis, though, I sort of withdrew. I stopped talking to friends. I stopped hanging out. I stopped being social. Um, for a few reasons. I mean, one of the reasons is that for some reason, I mean, I can't explain it today, but at the time, I just thought people were gonna look at me and know, like they're gonna look at me and they're gonna know that I have bipolar disorder. It's impossible to know to do that, but I wasn't thinking clearly at that time, and so I kind of was ashamed and embarrassed to go out because I was afraid people were gonna find out. The other like real big reason though that I really withdrew and became unsocial was out of fear. Um, I just, because again, like I told you, when I thought of bipolar, I thought of that very severe case. And so then I became afraid of myself. I became afraid to go out in public, to do the things that I had once enjoyed. Because what was I going to do? What was I going to say? What was going to happen? I mean, just a huge fear. And of course the stigma that goes with it. And so I virtually, like, I basically, I stopped living. You know, I sunk into a deep depression about it. I felt really, for lack of a better term, shitty about myself. I started to question everything about me. I started to question myself as a mother. And at this time, back in 2009, I had been a mom for 4 years, a little over 4 years. I started to question myself as a daughter, as a mother, as a friend, as a person, as a woman. Everything got put into question with a diagnosis. I don't know why, but it did. And I'm sure it does with any mental disorder that anybody gets diagnosed with. I'm sure they feel the same way at one point. And my withdrawing really started to affect my family, like my daughter and my husband. My husband and I, when we got together before I was diagnosed, um, we liked to go out a lot. We were very social, always out to dinner, always having a couple of drinks, going dancing, going to watch shows, going to movies, things of that nature. And I really just, I was afraid. And even if I went out with my husband, even if my husband could talk me into going out, when we were out there, you know, I just, I was so scared. So I was kind of very protective of how very cautious of myself. So it ended up, I would either be really cranky and irritable because I didn't want to be there, or I was just like that Debbie Downer that sits in the corner and mopes the whole time, that kind of just brings the whole atmosphere down. I mean, that was me. And so, as you can imagine, my husband, he's trying to unwind from work. He's trying to enjoy himself, live life, and here I am, bringing him down. And I'm sure we've all been in that situation where we've gone out with somebody that was like that, and it does. When they're miserable, they virtually make everybody miserable, and that was me. And so, as you can imagine, there was a little friction there between my husband and I. We kind of sort of started arguing a little bit about it, nothing major. And it started to affect my daughter too, because I didn't take her to parks. I didn't take her to story times at the library. We stayed home. I was afraid to go anywhere with her because I was afraid of me. And I didn't like that feeling. And I saw the effect that it was having on my family. And I don't know what happened. It's just one day I was just sitting there and I realized that I wasn't living at all, and that the bipolar disorder was controlling my life, And I mean, it was. It changed who I was. It changed what I did, what I enjoyed. It changed virtually everything about me. And not only was it changing me, but it was changing the dynamic of my family. And like I said, it was starting to affect them. And so I realized I had to do something. And I only had, in that situation, I had two options. I could continue living the way that I was with the bipolar disorder controlling me and dictating my every move and my life choices and making my family miserable. Or I could try and gain control of my bipolar disorder and, for lack of a better term, make it my bitch. I mean, that's what I had to do. And so I started researching. I started reading articles on the internet, from trusted sites. You don't just want to read any article. I started reading books. I started asking questions. I mean, I would literally write down questions to take to my therapists or my doctor and ask them. I started researching my medications, researching natural ways to help with bipolar disorder, non-medicated ways to help, or non-pharmaceutical ways to help with my bipolar disorder. And I really just became proactive and motivated to take control of it. And I have, because I realized that, yeah, okay, but for a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, I wasn't any kind of a different person that I was before. I mean, I was avoiding situations that before diagnosis, okay, I had gone to 1,000 clubs with 100 friends. We had great times, never got into any trouble. No, not that I was caught. I mean, did I get into fights? Yeah, I got into several fights pre-diagnosis, especially in my younger years. Was I mouthy? Yeah. Did I destroy nights sometimes with my lack of impulse control and my bipolar episodes? Absolutely. Do I regret it? Yes, but for the most part, we had fun, and I just sort of realized that I wasn't any different than I had been. So why couldn't I go out and enjoy those times? The only difference is now I was aware of things. So now I could start learning triggers, ways to avoid triggers, way to handle triggers that are unavoidable, you know, and I took back my life, and it changed everything, from my family dynamic down to who I am. I mean, I can say I'm a different person since being diagnosed, but in a good way, in a positive way. And I encourage anybody who is diagnosed with bipolar disorder to educate yourself. Do not be afraid to ask questions. I mean, you really have to have a good doctor, because not just any counselor can handle bipolar disorder. I have found that out. And I mean that honestly. I'm not saying that, your typical therapists and counselors, aren't good or whatever, but I'm saying that it really takes a special type. Your typical counselors, you're just your regular counselors right out of, psych school and or college or whatever you want to call it. They can't handle bipolar disorder. It takes a thoroughly educated counselor, a psychologist really, to handle it, to be able to help you with it. You know, on top of that, you've got to have your psychiatrist too if you've got to be on medication so that they can handle that part of it. And then the psychologist, of course, handles the mental aspect of it. Um, and that's really, that's where I've come now. I was medicated for about the first 3 years after diagnosis. And then about 6 months before I ended up pregnant, I had to get off my medication because we lost insurance, and one medication, 1 month of one of my medication was $1,000. Um, so as you can imagine, we couldn't afford that on top of my counseling appointments and everything like that. So I sort of started getting more diligent about researching non-pharmaceutical ways to handle my bipolar disorder because I was put in that position where I had no choice. I couldn't afford the medication. So but I didn't want to go backwards and start to be who I was before. You know, I didn't want to be that person again that was always angry and yelling and screaming. So I really became proactive. I changed my diet a little bit. What's not known, I've realized, what's not known with a lot of people who share my diagnosis or just anxiety and depression in general is that caffeine is a major trigger for anxiety. And I mean, I thought that was kind of common sense, but when I'm talking to people and I'm telling people, like, they're like, really? Like, that's one of the first things that I did. I cut out caffeine. I was a heavy pop drinker, mostly like Pepsi, Coke, your heavily, caffeinated drinks. I stopped. I started drinking water, non-caffeinated drinks, Sprite, Sierra Mist, things of that nature. Um, and it helped tremendously. I mean, it honestly did. It kept my anxiety down. Did it help everything? Absolutely not. But it kept my anxiety down. So that was like one of the first things I tried. Of course, exercise. I like to do yoga. I haven't done it in a while, but yoga really relaxes my mind. I mean, it honestly does. I know people make fun of yoga and the positions are kind of weird, but it honestly does relax me. I used to do yoga. I have a Wii Fit, and, because I'm no yoga expert, and I'm not one of those people to go to a gym or anything like that. So I kind of had to do it at home on my own. And so my Wii Fit comes with yoga. And I mean, it's great. I just do that for 15, 20 minutes, sometimes a half an hour a day. And it's amazing how much calmer I feel. My mood rises. I start feeling better, less stressed, less anxious. It's a wonderful feeling. And just other things, I started to do things like that adult coloring, you know. Um, I do that. Just things that I like to do, that I used to do, just calming things. I like to do puzzles. I do puzzles. Like I said, the adult coloring. And music is great therapy. I know everybody says that, and it's true. It is wonderful therapy. My musical taste ranges anywhere from 50s to 60s music to rap music to country music to rock and roll. I like all sorts of music, and it's funny because my, like, particular taste at a certain time depends on my mood. If I'm angrier, I like your more heavy metal rock songs. I don't know why. It just, that screaming, it just helps me get stuff out. When I'm in a really depressed mood, I like to listen to, your country songs, your love ballads, your slower songs, things like that. And believe it or not, it doesn't put me deeper into depression. It sort of helps to bring me out because I tie music to my life, and I can listen to a song and it can remind me of something or somebody in my life. And I can sit and I can have a good cry listening to that song if I'm in a depressed mood. And releasing that through tears and stuff, it really does help. I know people see crying as, weakness and vulnerability, but honestly, crying really is a great release. And that's for anything. That's for happiness, anger, sadness. I mean, a good cry sometimes can make you feel on top of the world again. I don't understand it because it doesn't sound right to me, but I've done it. I've experienced it. So I can, with 100% certainty say that crying does help. I mean, there are times where I'll go take, like, I like to soak in hot baths. It just helps me relax. That's my time. Nobody's in there with me. I'm by myself, and it helps me relax. And there are times where I will cry in there for no reason. There's nothing making me sad. Everything's going good in my life. Day was good. I just cry because all the emotions rush into me, because I guess it's what bipolar disorder is. It's basically an emotional processing disorder, really. And so I have all these emotions that come in, and I release them through tears. And I can get out of that bathtub and be in a great mood, you know? It's a wonderful feeling. But I started to do things like that, avoiding red meat. Red meat can cause symptoms of bipolar disorder, you know? Avoiding red meat, I eat a lot of chicken. Love chicken. It's like my favorite food. And that helped. And that's just what I did to get control of it. And of course, I read a few books on cognitive behavior therapy. Um, I journaled. I can tell you the best way to learn your triggers, because really the best thing that you could do when you're diagnosed with bipolar disorder is learn your triggers. That helps tremendously because when you learn your triggers, you can learn to avoid things so that you don't bring yourself into an episode. And of course, it's life, so you're going to have unavoidable triggers, stress, finances, whatever, your triggers are. You're going to have unavoidable ones. But really, like, if you read up on cognitive behavior therapy and you get the right book, the right information, it really can help you learn how to handle those unavoidable triggers. And that helped a lot. And I still do it. And am I perfect? No. I still have breakthrough episodes. I still have my moments, especially if, things are really stressful for me at home, or we're going through a situation, this and that. I mean, I like to say that I'm perfect and I can control it every time, but I can't. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being on medications. I was medicated again after I had my daughter for about the first year. And then I didn't like it because my Depakote, I'll tell you, I was on Depakote, uh, Prestique, and Lamictal. And I don't know kind of which one it was. It was either the Depakote or the Lamictal because I took both at night. I mean, I took my Depakote 3 times a day, but I took Lamictal at night with my Depakote. And it would make me sleep really hard and have really vivid dreams. I had a newborn child at home. My husband works, he's a carpenter, so, he's up early, and he works 10, 12, 14 hours a day sometimes. So, he can't be up with the baby all night. And my infant, for about the first 3 years of her life, did not sleep at night. I mean, it was horrible. A different vlog for a different day, but it was bad. So I couldn't take that medicine anymore. And so again, it was just like before. When I couldn't afford it, I kind of sort of had to get control of it again. But I can tell you, um, being on medication is good because it can help get it under control. But I don't want to sit here and let you think that, like, you have to be on medication for the rest of your life. Sometimes, certain people do, because, like I say all the time, bipolar is different for everybody, you know? So sometimes you may have to be, sometimes if you've got the more severe episodes, then yeah, you might have to be on medication. But if you're really proactive about your disorder and you really research it, like, really good, and get with the right therapist that can help you with cognitive behavior therapy, and teach you other tools and techniques on how to handle things in your life, you really can get off the medication, honestly. And like I said, medication's not a bad thing. I'm not opposed to taking it. when I get to points where I know I have to take it, I go right back on it, you know? I mean, I'm not, like against it. I'm for it. But like I said, I have things in my life where I don't want to be on it all the time, you know? I don't like being asleep and not being able to hear my children if they get sick or they have a bad dream or something like that happens. I don't like that. I like to be able to hear my kids. Um, so, but I've been off medication now for 3 years. Yeah, about 3 years. I've been off medication. And another different vlog for a different day, but the last 3 years that I've been off my medication have been really hard. My husband and I have been struggling with some stuff because my husband, and I don't know how much he'll want me to tell you right now. I sort of haven't discussed it with him, but my husband just found out that he has some issues that he's dealing with, mental wise. So before he was diagnosed, though, he was unaware, and it was really hard on our marriage. Um, and of course, being the mother of a newborn and the mother of, another child, trying to also work to pay the bills, keep my marriage together, keep my kids together, all while trying to maintain a perfectly normal life, happy life for my kids so that they would know if anything was wrong. It was very stressful. So I probably should have been on my medication, but I wasn't. Um, but that's a different vlog for a different day. But I have been unmedicated now, and my husband is doing his thing. He's aware of his situation now. He's getting help, and everything is great in that regard. So now I'm feeling a little bit more balanced. Um, I do my yoga. I do my cognitive behavior therapy now. I'm not on medication, but I do go see my therapist once a week for now. I was sort of off her, but then in the last month I started rapid cycling, so I've gone back to see her once a week. And it's really helpful. She's really awesome, and I love her. And if I could say her name, I would, but I recommend her to anybody. Um, so that's just sort of life for me after I got diagnosed. Um, I decided to become open about it because one of the worst parts about my diagnosis was the isolated way I felt. I mean, I really did, because my family members, my friends, they don't have it. Well, a couple of my family members do that I found out after I became open, but at the time, I didn't know anybody with bipolar disorder, so I really felt isolated and by myself. And that's a horrible feeling because you need that person to talk to. You need to be able to vent and get things out, not always just to a doctor. Because doctors aren't available 24 hours, 7 days a week, you know? And so you need that person that you can run to, and I felt like I didn't have that person, because how was anybody supposed to understand what I was going through and how I was feeling? How were they supposed to help me? You know, how was I supposed to be able to talk to them? So I felt really, really isolated, and it was a bad feeling. So I decided to become more open about it because a lot of people aren't open about their bipolar disorder, and I don't blame them, because you get a stigma. Society, we're not nice. We're not. And we all have that capability. We are all of us in society, we're judgmental. We've all judged somebody. And I don't want you to sit there and say, not me. No, not me. Yes, you have. Okay? When you're in a store and you hear a child crying and screaming, and you make a comment to the effect of that child or to the effect of their parenting, you're judging. Okay? Even something as simple as saying, oh my God, I wish I'd get that spoiled brat out of here. That's passing judgment. You don't know why that child is screaming. You're just assuming that they're a spoiled brat. It's passing judgment. You're judging them. Um, so we all do it. We may not be aware that we're doing it, but we do it. We may not mean to do it, but we do it. And so that's why, and it keeps a lot of people from speaking out about, their mental illness. And I really think that that's a shame, because, to be honest with you, I think every single person in society at one time goes through something mental, be it anxiety, like an anxiety attack, or a moment of depression, a moment of mania. I think we all have that at some time in our life, some of us more than others. And so it's a shame that we can't be more open about who we are and about our mental illness, because it would really bring people together, you know? Um, just the feeling to know that you're not alone. And I keep saying it, but bipolar means something different to everybody. So I'm not saying like all of us feel the same way. We don't. We have a generalized understanding of how each other feels, but we live in different situations. We come from different backgrounds. We have different symptoms. We have different severity, levels. Um, so it's different for everybody, but we can sort of understand each other. You know, we could sort of lend an ear, a shoulder, whatever, and try to give some advice from ours, because we know what's going on the inside. And we know how frustrating and scary and confusing it can be. So that's kind of why I started speaking out. I want to let people know they're not alone in this, that you can have bipolar disorder, but you can still lead a normal life, because, it drives me nuts. We have disability for a reason in this country. I'm not against disability. There are people who really honestly need it. But then there are people who sort of use diagnoses as a way to get free money, because they're lazy. Some of us with bipolar disorder, we can't work. That's true. It's true. The more severe cases, it's impossible. You can't work. You can barely function, and get up in the morning, let alone go to a job 8 hours, 5 days a week. It's a lot. So for those cases, that's fine. But like in my case, I can get disability. I have the diagnosis along with other diagnoses. But I'm not incapable of working. As a matter of fact, I hold down a full-time job while being a mother and a wife. And I keep control of my house. I keep control of my kids. It's possible. I keep control of my bipolar disorder. I don't work in public. I work at home. Home working positions are out there. I'm a medical transcriptionist. I work from home. I type for clinics in St. Louis, Missouri, but I live in Ohio. Um, so it's possible to have a job, if you aren't on the severe level. So, the worst thing about it is, don't use your bipolar as an excuse. Don't do it. It's easy for us to go and have an episode of where, okay, like we freak out, screaming, yelling, violent, whatever your episodes are like. And it's easy for us to go, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I have bipolar disorder. It's not an excuse. Yes, impulse control is hard when you have bipolar disorder, but it's not impossible. You still can have it, especially if you are aware. If you're not aware of what you have, then you don't know. But if you're aware that you have bipolar disorder, if you're aware of your diagnosis, then you can definitely control some stuff. And it's not to be used as an excuse. It doesn't give us the right to treat a friend or a relative like crap and then expect them to forgive us because we're sick. Because we're not sick. Our brains don't process things the same as most people, but we're not sick. It's not an excuse, And it goes the same way, though, for our support systems, our friends and our family. You can't use our bipolar disorder to excuse your misbehaviors and every bad thing in your life either. And I can say that from experience, because I have, I don't know if you'd call her a family member. She's an in-law who, I'm not saying anything bad about her, but she doesn't handle life right. She's not perfect. None of us are perfect. And she does some things, and she's done some things to me that weren't right. And I'm a very open-mouthed person. When you do me wrong, I let you know about it. And usually not in a nice fashion. But when I would, bring this stuff to her attention of what she was doing to me, she would go back and she would say things to other people about how I was angry, I was upset, I called her and I yelled at her because I'm bipolar. And that drives me nuts. She would never tell anybody her misfortunes. it was always because I was bipolar. Oh, we're in a fight because she's having a bipolar episode. We go through this every so often. Da 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 da. But she failed to tell people of what she did to upset me. Do you see what I'm saying? She was just sort of blaming in the whole thing as if I just went crazy one day and stopped talking to her. And that's not the situation. You know, the other thing that people tend to do is they tend to chalk all my emotions up to being bipolar or to having bipolar. Um, and that's not true. I'm still human. I still have emotions. If a situation calls for anger, I'm going to be angry. If it calls for sadness, I'm going to be sad. If it calls for happiness, I'm going to be happy. You know, may I overreact? Possibly. You know, there's a good possibility, if I've not got control of myself, that I will overreact. Yes. Um, but I still have real feelings. So you can't chalk everything up to just, oh, she's bipolar, And that's the other thing. A lot of people, and I've slipped up and done it too, but a lot of people will say she is bipolar. Okay, that word is, I don't like it. I am not bipolar. I have bipolar, but would you look at a diabetic person and go, you are diabetes? Would you look at someone who has cancer and go, you are cancer? No, you wouldn't, because they're not. They have it, they're sick, but they are not the disease itself. They are not the illness. And it's the same with any mental illness. You know, you are not depression. You are depressed. You are the active depression, okay? But you are not the disease or the illness itself. So I hate when people refer to me as bipolar or being bipolar. I'm not being bipolar. I have bipolar, you know? And I know friends and family have said that about me, and it's okay. I'm not mad. It's easy to say. I've slipped up a few times in this video and said, when I'm being bipolar, and I hate that. But I slip up sometimes because it's just easy to do. Um, you know, and the other thing, that's happened to me since I've been diagnosed is that friends and family seem to think that because I have bipolar disorder, that I want to be friends with every bipolar person on this planet. That everybody who has bipolar disorder is going to be my best friend. And I don't want to be friends with people simply because they have bipolar disorder. Actually, probably the worst thing you could do is put a bunch of us that have bipolar disorder in the same room because we're probably going to get along for a while. But when we don't get along, it's probably not going to be pretty. But I've had friends fix me up with people because they're like, oh, and they'll say, oh, you have to meet my friend Susie. She has bipolar too. Like, are you fixing me up now? Like, can I only be friends with people who have bipolar disorder? I mean, and it's, I can laugh about it because it's, the intention behind it was good and nice, and I'm thankful and I love it. But, like, it really is rather sort of offensive. It's kind of like telling people who have, like, diabetes, you can only be friends with diabetic people. Like, oh, here, you gotta meet my friend Mary. She has diabetes too, so you guys will get along great because you have diabetes. I mean, it's just ridiculous to assume that because we share a mental illness that we're going to be the best of friends or that we need to talk. Um, you know, like I said, it's probably the worst thing because if they're in a mood and I'm manic and they're manic, we'll probably give each other bad advice like, oh, you want to go out and jump off a ledge? I think that would be awesome. You should do it. So it's probably not good. But in a way it is. I mean, I can see the intention behind it because, like I said, the whole reason I'm open is so that people know they're not alone, so we can lend an ear and sort of understand each other. But the whole purposeful fix-up thing doesn't work. I'm sorry. I love you. I don't know if you know who I'm referring to, but if you do, I'm sorry. I love you. But it doesn't work. Um, you know, and let's see, what else are some of the other things that have happened since I've been bipolar or since I've been diagnosed. I mean, I've been treated differently by people. At first, well, what's really funny is that when you tell somebody that you have bipolar disorder, like, and I don't want you to think like I walk up to people and I introduce myself and I'm like, hi, my name is Flip Side of Normal and I have bipolar disorder. That's not how it is at all. It's just if it comes up in the conversation and it's an appropriate time, I'll tell people. And I can't tell you how many times I've said to somebody, like, oh, I have bipolar disorder. And they look at me and go, I'm sorry. Like, what are you apologizing for? Did you make me have bipolar? Like, did you give it to me and I didn't know it? Like, seriously, what are you apologizing for? And there's nothing to be sorry about. I'm not terminal. I don't have a fatal illness. You know, I don't have to live in an institution for the rest of my life. What are you apologizing for exactly? You know? I mean, I know, like, that news can be kind of, you know, it can take you back, but, you know, and you might be a loss for words, but the best thing you could do is probably just say nothing at all instead of saying, I'm sorry, because that just doesn't make sense to me at all. Um, the other thing that I have people tell me when I tell them is, really? I couldn't tell. Like, it's almost like they have the same ideas I had when I was first diagnosed. You know, they're thinking of that really severe case of that person just freaking out and losing their mind all the time, and, you know, being really manic and not being able to have a conversation, you know, things like that. And so it kind of makes me laugh when people go, I couldn't tell. Like, I'll even, like, I've said this before, like, I was, I forget where I was. Oh, in a doctor's office. And I overheard somebody speaking, and they said something about bipolar disorder. And I went, oh, I have bipolar disorder. And the lady looked at me and was like, really? I couldn't tell. And I looked at her and I was like, really? Did I forget to wear my sign today? Because usually I have it written on my forehead. And I started laughing so that she would know I was joking and not being a smart aleck. And she kind of like was like, you know, foot in mouth, and but then she apologized, and I was like, it's fine, but, you know, I mean, because really, I mean, how can you tell if somebody's bipolar? It's like saying, oh, I couldn't tell you were depressed. If I don't tell you, you're not going to be able to tell, you know? So, but that's kind of the funny thing. But people do, my friends, some of my friends treat me differently still to this day. They treat me differently. When I got diagnosed, they stopped asking me to go out to like bars and stuff because they assumed that because I had bipolar disorder, I can't drink or go out in social situations, apparently, because before diagnosis I never drank anyway. I'm not a big drinker, and it's kind of a post for another day, but I come from a family of alcoholism, so I didn't want that. So I've always been very aware of drinking. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't drink at all ever. I do. I've known to have a few beers here and there, or some margaritas, stuff like that, but getting drunk, I'm 35, going on 36. I could count on one hand how many times I've gotten drunk, maybe 2 or 3 times, honestly. Because I'm afraid, you know, I know alcoholism takes hold and it takes hold fast, but they quit inviting me to these places because they think that I can't handle it. And my advice is, let me be the judge, because you don't know. Don't assume that I can't handle something. Don't assume that I won't want to go. Just ask me and give me the opportunity to turn you down, or give me the opportunity to make the decision for myself of whether or not I think that it would be a good situation. Um, and I've lost a lot of friends since being diagnosed. I wish I could tell you why. I don't know. A lot of people stopped talking to me. To me, I'm no different than I was, you know, I've been diagnosed for 8 years? Me, I'm no different than I was 10 years ago. Maybe a little bit more mature, you know, older, but personality-wise, it's still me, you know? So I don't know why, but I've lost friends, and it hurt, but then I just realized that if you can walk away from me for something like that, then you weren't my friend to begin with. Because a real friend stays by your side no matter what, you know? So it kind of really opened my eyes to who my friends really were. And it's made me more aware of people. I used to trust a lot of people. I used to think everybody was my friend. Since being diagnosed, I've really wised up, you know, and realized that that's not true. So, I mean, having bipolar disorder has changed my life, but I feel like it's changed my life for the better now. I'm a better person now that I'm aware of my diagnosis than I was before, you know, because I really, Because, like I said earlier, I know and I can watch now. I know what to look for inside of me to know when I'm getting manic, when I'm getting depressed, or when I'm going into a mood. And it's funny because my husband has even learned me in that way. And I can tell you how great that is to me. I don't even have to tell him, and he can tell. Like kids, kids like to push our buttons, and mine especially like to go push, push, push. Let's see how many buttons we can push until we make mom go full on psycho. I don't know why they do it. Probably because I don't know, they think it's funny. They think it's fun. They like me yelling and screaming. I don't know. But they do. They push my buttons. I try to get myself under control before I lose it, but, and I'm sure even people that don't have bipolar disorder, y'all know that it happens. We have freak out moments as moms. There's nothing wrong with it as long as we're not violent or abusive. There's nothing wrong with it. But my husband has sort of learned. And he has my mannerisms. He can tell by my mannerisms. He can tell by my body language. He can tell by the volume. He can tell by the speed of my voice. And he really will, when he sees me getting there, he steps in and he takes control. And either he takes control by telling me to go somewhere out, go outside, go to a different room, whatever, or he takes control by getting the kids and maybe taking them in a different room, taking them outside, or taking control of the situation at hand. And that's been really great. He is an amazing support system for me. And I know that I am not easy to live with. I know I'm not. I don't like being the way that I am sometimes. But it's me. I'm not going to excuse it and say I can't help it. I can. But sometimes it gets the best of me, as it does with anybody. But he's an amazing person. He's put up with a lot of shit from me. He honestly has. I told you my first video, I threw a glass at him, busted his eye, gave him stitches. I've punched him over and over again. I've said some of the most mean and hateful things, yelled and screamed, gotten mad at the dumbest stuff. He's still here. We've been together for going on 10 years. So, just amazing. But I am going to tell you that it takes a special kind of person to handle somebody like me, with bipolar disorder. You really have to be understanding. You really have to be willing to learn and to bend and to flex. Because you have to. Because there are times I can't, because I can't see it. That like I said, the bipolar gets the best of me at times and I become blind. I can't see it. He's got to be the voice of reason sometimes. I mean, there have been a couple of times that he has really gotten my ass out of a pickle. Because my mouth, now I'm not saying I'm weak. I can handle my shit. But there are certain times when maybe I shouldn't run my mouth because it probably would have been overtaken. He's gotten me out of it. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. When my husband starts yelling, people start listening and running. People get afraid. So he's, really stepped up and cashed the checks that my mouth wrote, but my ass couldn't cash. And I'm thankful for that. But I think I'm starting to ramble now, so I'm going to end the video here. But that's just sort of a look into really after being diagnosed. And I'm sure I'll do more videos with more information. But I don't want to start rambling and boring people. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, I can't thank you guys enough. My supporters, my viewers, I can't thank you enough. It means the world to me to know that I'm actually doing something good and I'm helping people, because that is what I want to do. So, until next time, peace, y'all.